Hey, I'm Zarina Matcha, and you're watching Non-Feminist Gal. Andrew Tate is a figure who has been circling the internet a lot over the past several months. What's funny is that when I first heard about him, I suddenly started hearing people just discussing him everywhere, and his name just randomly popped up in so many conversations, which to me is some serious synchronicity. I know that there is a ton of information out there about Andrew Tate, and people have all kinds of different opinions on him. I don't want to give this man too much of my time, so I am going to briefly discuss the three main problems that I can see overall with Andrew Tate. Number one, Andrew Tate is a narcissist. Having watched a few of Andrew Tate's videos and seen what he does and the way in which he speaks, it's clear to me that he definitely displays these very narcissistic traits and doesn't sincerely care about people and doesn't speak with positive intentions. He has no social decency, no sense of respect for others. He interrupts people frequently while speaking and holds all of his opinions in extremely high regard. This comes from a lack of self-awareness that narcissists or people with narcissistic traits often possess. His content seems to appeal to the lowest sorts of very uneducated people who don't really think that deeply about things and just want to follow someone who spouts this very crass, sensationalist rhetoric. This is very concerning given his platform size and the fact that he has many supporters. He is a conventionally attractive man, although while watching him speak, I did find him very unattractive. He is also extremely wealthy and financially successful, and we do tend to look up to those who have done well for themselves and achieved financial success and stability. This is generally a positive thing, but in his case, his financial success is based on exploiting women in horrendously cruel manners, not to mention exploiting thousands of young, impressionable young men through filling their heads with a bunch of poorly worded vitriol. His content claims to serve the purposeless young men out there who are lacking direction, and he champions himself as a voice for the struggling young man. However, he himself is a high-status male who presents himself in a messiah-like fashion of someone who has come to save men, yet whose content is fueled by egotism and a deluded sense of grandiosity, which is very common among narcissists. While there are a few things that Andrew Tate says which I do probably agree with on a very basic level, such as the obvious fact that men and women are different, and even some of his views on feminism, his motivation for speaking is not to help or educate others, it's to fuel his ego and to elevate himself in a position of grandiose through using very crude and overall rather misogynistic language. Which brings me to number two. Andrew Tate is a misogynist. Now, along with his narcissism is his obvious misogyny, and misogyny is obviously very narcissistic, as to hate someone and put someone down on the basis of being a woman or a homosexual or transgender, etc. is usually tied to having a very self-serving ego and a sense of self-importance over others. Andrew Tate reminds me of a man named Roosh V, who used to be more well-known and seems to have, thankfully, faded out of the social zeitgeist. Roosh ran a blog named Return of Kings, which wrote extremely rude, misogynistic and unkind things about women and gender relations in general. Again, as someone who is very much against feminism, there probably are some small things on a baseline level that I would agree on, but the way in which I phrase my views and my motivations for sharing those views are based on wanting to help move towards a more egalitarian future, not to further spark division between men and women. Because feminism is such a huge problem in our society, it's natural that these extremely misogynistic, angry men would rise up out of that as a horrific counter to feminism. I'm not entirely blaming feminism for the rise of these extreme misogynists, merely saying that when you have one extreme ideology being so prevalent in a society, it tends to give way to another extreme ideology that runs counter to that, and then what you end up with are two extremes. The severe misandry within certain aspects of feminism is countered by the severe misogyny of some of these awful men who genuinely do not respect, admire, or care about women. Andrew Tate used to run a course all about how he manipulated impressionable young women into falling in love with him and then performing for him on webcam. It's very likely that he psychologically and possibly even physically abused some of these women. There have been many allegations against him, and there are mixed discussions around whether he actually committed the crimes he has been accused of, but based on his entire demeanour and the way he speaks about women, I wouldn't be surprised if he had been physically abusive to numerous women. He seems like someone who is very proud of mistreating women, and he's probably caused many women severe mental health difficulties and a lot of emotional stress as a result of being around such a person. Number 3, Andrew Tate has influence. Finally, the scariest thing I find about Andrew Tate is that he is a person with a lot of influence. If I had a son who was consuming Tate's videos, I would be extremely worried. As mentioned earlier, Tate is extremely successful and has acquired his success and wealth through exploitative means to serve his own ego. Narcissists often distort truth and reality to make themselves look better, and are very good at charming and psychologically manipulating others into following what they say. Since many people do not understand how narcissism works and how people with narcissistic characteristics use language and behavior to manipulate others for personal gain, many who gain much influence who do unfortunately have narcissistic tendencies can use this to their advantage at the unfortunate detriment of others. I do hope that Tate doesn't gain any more influence and find it very concerning that lots of young men look up to such a person, because there is really nothing positive to gain from watching someone like Andrew Tate. He's extremely uneducated, extremely crude and crass. He's not presenting those views in a way that is helpful, honest, or positive. He's presenting them in a way to manipulate young men into following him and to embody severe disrespect and to essentially shit all over women and present the kind of severe, extreme misogyny that runs counter to much of the misandry that I and many others dislike within feminism. His entire setup and the way in which he speaks pretty much appeals to the lowest denominator of the extremely uneducated, ignorant, and rather small-minded people. I really can't understand why anyone would take such a person seriously. There are far more other, better, anti-woke male influencers that one can follow who do not embody Tate's severe narcissism, egotism, and general lack of education. 2 very simple examples are Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. I personally am a massive Peterson fan, and what I respect a lot about him is how he speaks so calmly and intelligently and frames his viewpoints in a way that's direct and also accessible. Regarding Ben Shapiro, I'm not a huge fan of his content or what he says, but again, he is very genuine and sincere in how he speaks and comes from a position of intellectualism and sincerity. I don't really mind people having views different from me if they are coming from a place of sincerity and intelligence rather than a place of anger and egotism. Another fair example is Rollo Tomasi, author of The Rational Male, which actually inspired the title for my upcoming book, The Rational Female. While again I may not agree with all of Rollo's views, he is coming from a place of pragmatism, and being someone who has a wife and daughter doesn't speak about women with the huge level of disrespect and crassness that Andrew Tate so heavily embodies. Overall, I think that Andrew Tate is a truly vile, self-centered, and all-round vulgar person, and young boys should really not be looking up to such a person. There are far better male role models out there, so many amazingly successful men who actually have good character and do not speak so ill of women and reek of this disgustingly egotistical self-importance and just general social ignorance. I do hope that Tate is nothing more than a passing internet fad like Roosh V, who eventually fades out of the social zeitgeist, and I do hope that people stop turning to these extremely polarizing and divisive figureheads who clearly only want to stir up chaos for personal gain, rather than create meaning and positivity in such a divided world. But what do you think about Andrew Tate? Is there anything positive about him? Does he have any redeeming qualities? Is he simply a passing internet fad, or shall his influence spread widely? I severely doubt it and hope not. If you enjoyed this video, do consider subscribing to stay up to date with the content that I post, and also consider joining my Discord group, Liberals Against Feminism, to discuss feminism with like-minded people.